The first sign that something was wrong came when the humans asked for clarification. Supreme Admiral Zelthan stood rigid in the command chamber of the Eternal Glory, his four arms crossed behind his back as he studied the primitive blue world rotating slowly on the main display. The planet looked unremarkable, really. Standard Class M world with acceptable atmospheric composition, adequate water distribution, and what appeared to be a moderately advanced industrial civilization. The energy signatures suggested they had recently achieved nuclear capability, which usually meant they understood exactly how easily they could be erased from existence. "Send the standard ultimatum," Zelthan commanded, his voice carrying the weight of 3 millennia of unquestioned authority. Full spectrum broadcast on all their communication frequencies. Fleet Communications Officer Zektar activated the transmission array with practiced efficiency. The message that began broadcasting toward Earth was identical to the one that had brought 847 other species to their knees. A demonstration of power, a list of demands, and a very simple choice between submission and extinction. Within minutes, the primitive planet was buzzing with activity. Their crude electromagnetic communications networks lit up like a swarm of angry insects as they received the Dominion's message. Zelthan had witnessed this pattern countless times before. First came panic, then desperate attempts at communication, then the inevitable surrender. But when the response came, it wasn't what anyone in the Dominion fleet expected. Admiral? Zektar's mandibles clicked nervously as he processed the incoming transmission. "We're receiving a response from the humans."
"Excellent."
"Patch it through." The main display shifted from the planetary view to show a middle-aged human male sitting behind what appeared to be a simple wooden desk. The being had graying hair, laugh lines around his eyes, and was wearing what intelligence reports identified as a formal government uniform. The human looked directly into the camera with an expression that Zelthan couldn't quite identify. "Hello there," the human said in perfectly clear galactic standard, which was itself unusual. Most species required several days to decode and respond to their ultimatum. "This is President Chen of the United Earth Government. We received your message, and I have to say, it was quite entertaining." Entertaining? Zelthan felt the first stirrings of confusion. No species had ever described their ultimatum as entertaining. "However," the human continued, "we need some clarification before we can provide an official response. When you say you're demanding our surrender, are you referring to conditional surrender, unconditional surrender, or are you perhaps thinking of something more along the lines of tribute payments? Because the terms and conditions really matter here, you understand." The command chamber fell completely silent. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever asked for clarification on the terms of their own subjugation. Also, President Chen added, consulting what appeared to be a list on his desk, "Your demonstration of power was impressive, but we're wondering if that asteroid destruction was achieved through antimatter annihilation, quantum manipulation, or some form of exotic matter conversion. Our scientists are quite curious about the technical specifications." Zektar's four eyes bulged as he processed the translation. "Admiral, they appear to be asking about our weapons technology." "I heard the translation," Zelthan snapped, though privately he was as bewildered as his subordinate. "Respond with Standard Protocol 7. Inform them that questions from inferior species are not permitted." The response went out, but instead of the usual terrified silence that followed such rebukes, the human's face broke into what intelligence files indicated was called a smile. "Oh, I see," President Chen said. "You're going with the mysterious superior beings approach. Classic move. Very intimidating. But here's the thing. We've actually been expecting you for quite a while now." "Expected them?" Zelthan's four arms tensed. "That was impossible. The Dominion's approach vectors were calculated to avoid detection until the final moment. Our xenobiology teams have been studying your species for approximately 18 months, the human continued conversationally, "ever since your scout ship started surveying our system. Nice cloaking technology, by the way, but you might want to upgrade your gravitational dampers. They leave some interesting signatures in our solar wind detectors." The silence in the command chamber was deafening. 18 months? Their scouts had maintained perfect operational security. No primitive species had ever detected Dominion reconnaissance. "But that's not the interesting part," President Chen said, and now his smile had taken on a quality that made Zelthan's diplomatic translator struggle to find equivalent expressions. "The interesting part is what our analysis teams discovered about your previous conquests." Admiral Zelthan felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. "What?" What did your analysis reveal? Well, the human said, leaning back in his chair, it turns out that every single species you've conquered had a few things in common. They were all reasonably advanced technologically, they all had unified planetary governments, and most importantly, they all developed in relatively peaceful environments. The human paused, and when he continued, something in his voice had changed. Earth is different, Admiral. We've never had a unified planetary government in our entire history. We've been fighting continuous wars for over 5,000 years. We've genocided our own species so efficiently that we've had to invent new words for different types of mass murder. When your people were learning to build faster-than-light engines, we were perfecting the art of killing each other with rocks, sticks, and whatever else we could get our hands on. President Chen stood up from his desk, and the camera angle widened to show more of the room. The walls were covered with what appeared to be historical artifacts, weapons, and battle flags. You see, Admiral, you've been conquering civilizations that achieve peace and then develop technology. We're a civilization that developed technology specifically to be better at war. Every single advancement in human science has been driven by our desire to more efficiently kill other humans. When we invented flight, we immediately weaponized it. When we split the atom, we turned it into a bomb. When we developed computers, we used them to guide missiles. The human walked closer to the camera, and Zelthan found himself unconsciously stepping backward. So when you show up here with your impressive fleet and your demands for surrender, offering us the choice between submission and extinction, you have to understand something. President Chen's smile had transformed into something that made Zelthan's survival instincts scream warnings. Those aren't different options for us. Those are both fighting words. The transmission cut off, leaving the command chamber in stunned silence. Sir? Zekdar asked tentatively. How should we respond? Before Zelthan could answer, alerts began chiming across every workstation in the command chamber. The tactical display lit up with thousands of new contacts emerging from what had appeared to be empty space around Earth. Report, Zelthan barked. Admiral, we're detecting massive electromagnetic signatures from the planet's surface. They appear to be activating some sort of defensive grid. What kind of defensive grid? Sir, our sensors are reading over 12,000 nuclear launch platforms coming online simultaneously. Also detecting what appears to be, Admiral, this can't be right. What is it, sir? They appear to have orbital weapons platforms, hundreds of them. Our intelligence reports indicated this species hadn't achieved significant orbital infrastructure. Zelthan stared at the tactical display as more and more hostile contacts appeared. Hidden bases were revealing themselves across Earth's moon. Asteroid mining operations in the outer system were suddenly broadcasting military identification codes. Even some of the supposedly dead rocks in their asteroid belt were showing energy signatures consistent with armed installations. How long have they been preparing for this? He whispered. As if in answer to his question, another transmission arrived from Earth. This time it was a different human, a female in what appeared to be a military uniform. Admiral Zelthan, she said. And the fact that she knew his name sent chills down his spine. This is General Sarah Morrison, Commander of Earth Defense Command. President Chen asked me to provide you with some additional information that might help clarify our position. The human's image was replaced by what appeared to be a tactical briefing display. 18 months ago, when we detected your scout ships, we activated something we call the Damocles Protocol. This is a defensive strategy we've been developing for the past 60 years, ever since we first started seriously considering the possibility of hostile first contact. The display showed a three-dimensional map of the solar system, with thousands of weapon emplacements, defensive platforms, and military installations highlighted in red. You see, Admiral, humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We've been hoping for peaceful first contact our entire history, but we've been preparing for war since we first looked up at the stars. The tactical display zoomed in on Earth's moon, revealing a massive complex of underground installations.
Luna Base 1 houses our primary strategic command center, along with manufacturing facilities capable of producing approximately 5,000 nuclear warheads per day.
Our asteroid mining operations have been simultaneously extracting resources and building fortified positions throughout the system. And our scientific research stations are actually heavily armed battle platforms. The image shifted back to General Morrison, whose expression was deadly serious. But Admiral, here's what I really want you to understand. Everything I've just shown you, every weapon platform, every fortification, every strategic preparation we've made over the past 18 months, represents less than 15% of Earth's total military capability. Zelfin felt his legs weaken. Less than 15%? You see, Admiral, you made a fundamental error in your intelligence gathering. You assume that because we haven't fought any interstellar wars, we don't know how to fight them. But humans don't learn how to fight by fighting external enemies. We learn how to fight by fighting each other. And we've been doing that for so long and so well that we've become very, very good at it. The transmission paused, and when Morrison continued, her voice carried a tone that Zelfin had heard before, but never directed at him.
It was the voice of someone who held all the cards and was enjoying the game.
So here's our counteroffer. Admiral, you have 72 hours to withdraw your fleet from our solar system. If you choose to stay, we'll consider that a declaration of war. And Admiral? We've been looking forward to our first interstellar war for a very long time. The transmission ended, and the command chamber descended into chaos as alarms began blaring from every station. Report! Zelfin shouted over the noise. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups from the planet's surface. They appear to be charging some sort of planet-based weapon systems. What kind of weapons? Admiral, our sensors are reading energy signatures consistent with stellar manipulation devices. Zelfin's blood ran cold. Stellar manipulation? That was technology the Dominion itself had only theoretical knowledge of. Sir, Zektar called out, his voice cracking with panic. We're also detecting movement from their previously hidden installations. They're targeting us. On the tactical display, Zelfin watched in growing horror as thousands of weapon systems across the human solar system began rotating toward his fleet. These weren't the crude nuclear missiles he'd expected from a primitive species. These were sophisticated targeting arrays, particle beam platforms, and weapon systems he couldn't even identify. Admiral, his chief tactical officer reported. Preliminary analysis suggests the humans have achieved military parity with our fleet. That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated they were decades away from interstellar-capable technology. Sir, I think their technology was never intended for exploration. It was designed specifically for warfare. As if to punctuate that statement, another transmission arrived from Earth. This time it was simply an audio message, broadcast on all frequencies. It was the sound of laughter, millions of voices, all laughing. But it wasn't the laughter of joy or celebration. It was the laughter of a species that had just realized they were about to get everything they'd ever wanted, a worthy enemy, a righteous cause, and the chance to test 60 years of military preparation against an actual interstellar threat. It was the laughter of a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to fight, and had finally found opponents who were actually worth fighting. Admiral Zelfin stared at the tactical display showing his supposedly overwhelming fleet surrounded by thousands of hostile contacts, and for the first time in 3 millennia of conquest, he began to understand why some battles were better not to fight. The humans hadn't just refused to surrender, they had turned first contact into a trap, and from the sound of that laughter, they had been looking forward to springing it for a very long time. Admiral Zelfin had commanded fleets for over 800 years, but he had never experienced anything like the first human attack. It began quietly, almost subtly. The Dominion's standard defensive protocols were designed to detect incoming missiles, energy weapons, and kinetic projectiles. They were not designed to detect what appeared to be a small, harmless probe that emerged from Earth's upper atmosphere and began broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies. Admiral, Zektar reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the command chamber. We're receiving another transmission from the humans. On screen. The probe's signal resolved into the image of another human, this one much younger than the previous two.
He appeared to be in his 20s, with bright eyes and an enthusiasm that seemed completely inappropriate given the circumstances.
Hello, Admiral Zelfin, the young human said cheerfully. My name is Dr. Marcus Webb, and I'm a xenobiologist with the Earth Defense Research Division. I hope you don't mind, but we took the liberty of analyzing the biological and technological samples your scout ships left behind during their surveillance missions. Samples? Zelfin's mandibles clicked in confusion. Standard reconnaissance protocols included strict contamination controls. His scouts shouldn't have left any traces. Oh, don't worry, Dr. Dipp, Webb continued, as if reading his thoughts. Your people were very careful. But you see, humans have been studying forensic science for centuries. We can extract usable information from the tiniest traces of evidence. A few skin cells here, some metal shavings there, even the electromagnetic residue from your cloaking fields. It all adds up. The young human's image was replaced by a detailed biological schematic that made Zeltan's 4 hearts skip simultaneously. It was a complete anatomical breakdown of his species, including nervous system pathways, organ functions, and what appeared to be psychological profiles. Based on our analysis, Dr. Webb's voice continued over the display. We've determined that your species evolved on a high-gravity world with a methane-rich atmosphere. Your biology suggests you're naturally adapted for cooperative pack hunting, with enhanced sensory capabilities and distributed neural processing. Fascinating stuff, really. The display shifted to show what appeared to be a detailed technical schematic of Dominion's ship design. Your technology is equally interesting. Fusion-based power systems, quantum entanglement communication arrays, and artificial gravity generation using controlled gravitational fields. The metallurgy is particularly impressive, though we detected some interesting vulnerabilities in your hull composition. Vulnerabilities? Zelfan felt the first cold touch of real fear. Tactical analysis now, he barked to his staff. Your ships appear to use a crystalline lattice structure in the hull plating, Dr. Webb continued cheerfully. Excellent for deflecting energy weapons and kinetic impacts, but it has one interesting property. When exposed to specific resonant frequencies, the lattice structure becomes dramatically more brittle. The tactical display in the command chamber suddenly lit up with warnings as every ship in the fleet simultaneously reported hull integrity alerts. Sir, the tactical officer called out, we're detecting some kind of resonance effect in our hull plating. Structural integrity is dropping across the entire fleet. Doctor. Webb's image returned to the screen, and his smile had taken on the same unsettling quality Zelthan had noticed in the previous human communications. Right about now, your hull integrity should be decreasing by approximately 12%, the young human said conversationally. Don't worry, it's not dangerous at current levels. We're just demonstrating that we understand your technology well enough to exploit it. The resonance effect ceased as suddenly as it had begun, and hull integrity readings returned to normal. The beautiful thing about human science, Dr. Webb continued, is that we don't just study how things work. We study how to break them. It's a survival trait we developed over thousands of years of trying to kill each other more efficiently. Admiral Zelthan was about to order the probe destroyed when his communications officer interrupted with panic in his voice. Admiral, we're receiving thousands of similar signals from across the system. Every hidden installation, every weapons platform, every defensive position the humans revealed is broadcasting technical specifications. What kind of specifications? Sir, they appeared to be instruction manuals. Before Zelthan could ask for clarification, the main display shifted to show a split screen. On one side was Dr. Webb still smiling his unsettling smile. On the other was a schematic that looked disturbingly familiar. This, Dr. Precaution, Webb announced, is a complete technical manual for constructing your faster-than-light drive system. We reverse-engineered it from the gravitational signatures your scout ships left behind. The schematic was incredibly detailed, showing not just the basic principles but specific component designs, power requirements, and what appeared to be manufacturing instructions. Of course, Dr. Webb continued, we've made some improvements to the basic design. Human engineering tends to focus on efficiency, durability, and tactical applications. Your version is quite elegant, but it's not really optimized for combat conditions. The display showed a side-by-side comparison between the original Dominion drive system and what appeared to be a human-modified version. The human version was smaller, more heavily armored, and incorporated what looked like multiple redundant systems. We've also taken the liberty of sharing this information with every military installation in our system, Dr. Webb said cheerfully. Within approximately 6 hours, we'll have our first human-built, faster-than-light capable interceptors launching from Lunar Base. Within 48 hours, we'll have a fleet. Zelthan stared at the display in growing horror. They had reverse-engineered faster-than-light technology in 18 months? That was impossible. Even the Dominion's most advanced science teams required decades to develop new FTL variations. Admiral, his chief science officer, reported, preliminary analysis suggests their reverse engineering is not only accurate but represents several significant improvements over our current technology. How is that possible? Sir, I believe their entire approach to scientific development is different from ours. We study natural phenomena to understand them. They appear to study everything, to find ways to weaponize it. As if to demonstrate this point, Dr. Webb's image was replaced by another human, this one wearing what appeared to be a military uniform with technical insignia. Admiral Zelthan, the new human said. I'm Colonel Sarah Chan, Chief Engineer for the Human Defense Technical Division. Dr. Webb asked me to provide you with some additional context that might help you understand our capabilities. The display shifted to show what appeared to be a historical timeline with various human technological developments marked along it. Humans have a unique approach to scientific advancement, Colonel Chen explained. We don't develop technology and then find applications for it. We identify problems we want to solve, usually involving how to kill our enemies more effectively, and then we develop whatever technology is necessary to solve those problems. The timeline highlighted specific developments: gunpowder, firearms, artillery, aircraft, radar, nuclear weapons, computers, satellites, and dozens of other innovations. Every major technological breakthrough in human history has been driven by military necessity, Chen continued. We invented powered flight because we wanted to drop explosives on our enemies from above. We developed nuclear physics because we wanted to build bigger bombs. We created computer networks because we wanted better command and control systems. The timeline extended into what appeared to be the present day, showing the rapid development of increasingly sophisticated technologies over the past 60 years. When we started seriously considering the possibility of extraterrestrial contact, we asked ourselves a very simple question: what if they're hostile? Then we spent 6 decades developing technology specifically designed to fight an enemy with superior capabilities. The display showed technical specifications for weapon systems that made Zelthan's military advisors exchange alarmed glances. Stellar manipulation devices for long-range bombardment. Quantum entanglement weapons for instantaneous strikes across interstellar distances. Artificial intelligence systems specifically designed for tactical coordination. Nanotechnology weapons capable of self-replication and autonomous targeting. Colonel Chen paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the same disturbing quality Zelthan had heard from the other humans. But, Admiral, here's what I really want you to understand. Everything I've shown you represents our defensive preparations. These are the weapons we built to protect ourselves from a superior enemy. The display shifted to show what appeared to be a much more extensive technical database. These are the weapons we built to take the fight to that enemy's home territory. The specifications that appeared on screen made several of Zelthan's officers step backward in shock. These weren't just weapons, they were entire categories of warfare that the Dominion had never even conceived of. Planet crackers that can destabilize stellar cores. Nanoscale weapons that can convert entire biospheres into military resources. Quantum weapons that can attack targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously. And our personal favorite, temporal manipulation devices that can alter local time streams to accelerate our military production. Admiral Zelthan found himself struggling to process what he was seeing. Temporal manipulation, dimensional warfare. These were theoretical concepts that even the Dominion's most advanced scientists considered impossible. The thing is, Admiral, Colonel Chen continued, we didn't develop these weapons because we're particularly aggressive. We developed them because we're paranoid. Humans have a saying: just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. We've spent our entire evolutionary history assuming that everything in the universe is trying to kill us. The display returned to show Colonel Chen directly, and her expression was deadly serious. Turns out we were right. The transmission cut off, leaving the command chamber in stunned silence. But before anyone could speak, alarms began blaring from every workstation. "Report!" Zelthan shouted. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of Earth's moon. Something is launching." The main display shifted to show Lunar Base, where what appeared to be hundreds of launch tubes were opening simultaneously. But instead of the crude missiles Zelthan expected, what emerged were sleek, obviously advanced spacecraft that immediately began accelerating at speeds that should have been impossible. "Sir, those ships are achieving velocities of over 0.8 light speed using conventional propulsion. That's faster than our best interceptors."
How many ships?
"Admiral, current count is over 3,000 and climbing." Zelthan watched the tactical display as wave after wave of human interceptors emerged from hidden launch facilities across their solar system. But these weren't the desperate, hastily constructed ships of a species making a last stand. These were sophisticated military vessels that had clearly been under construction for years. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "we're also detecting what appears to be some kind of massive construction project on the far side of their moon. Energy signatures are consistent with industrial manufacturing on a scale comparable to our primary shipyards." Before Zelthan could respond, another transmission arrived. This time it was a simple audio message from President Chen. Admiral, I hope Colonel Chen and Dr. Jed Webb have helped clarify our position. We wanted you to understand that when we laughed at your ultimatum, it wasn't because we were being dismissive or disrespectful. We laughed because we've been waiting for this opportunity our entire history. The President's voice paused, and when he continued, there was something in his tone that made every Dominion officer in the command chamber unconsciously check their personal weapons. You see, Admiral, humans are problem solvers. For thousands of years, our biggest problem was that we were too good at killing each other. We kept running out of worthy enemies. We'd develop new weapons, new tactics, new strategies, and then we'd use them to completely destroy whoever we were fighting. Another pause, and this time Zelthan could hear what sounded like multiple voices in the background, all speaking in excited, animated tones. The problem with fighting other humans is that they're just as smart as we are, just as adaptable, just as creative. Wars between humans tend to be short and decisive because we're all working with the same basic capabilities. But you, Admiral, you represent something we've never had before. President Chen's voice took on a quality that Zelthan recognized from his own species' hunting songs. You're a worthy enemy. You have superior technology, superior numbers, and superior experience. You represent everything we've been preparing to fight for the past 60 years. This isn't a war of survival for us, Admiral. This is Christmas morning. The transmission ended, and the command chamber fell silent except for the steady stream of alerts as more and more human military assets revealed themselves throughout the system. Admiral, Zektar said quietly, what are your orders? Zelton stared at the tactical display showing his fleet surrounded by thousands of human ships, with more launching every minute. For the first time in his long career, he found himself facing an enemy that seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of fighting a superior force. The humans hadn't just refused to surrender. They had turned the Dominion's ultimatum into the opening move of a game they had been preparing to play for generations. And from everything he had seen so far, they were very, very good at games. The battle began exactly 72 hours after the human ultimatum, but not in any way Admiral Zelthan could have anticipated. The Dominion had fought 847 successful campaigns across 3 millennia, and every single engagement had followed the same basic pattern. The superior Dominion fleet would position itself in optimal formation, demonstrate overwhelming firepower, and force the enemy into a decisive battle where technological superiority would determine the outcome. It was efficient, predictable, and had never failed. The humans threw out that entire playbook in the first 30 seconds. Admiral, Zektar reported, his voice tight with confusion. The human fleet is scattering. Zelthan stared at the tactical display as the 3,000 human interceptors that had been maintaining formation suddenly broke apart and began moving in apparently random directions. Some accelerated toward the outer system, others dove toward the inner planets, and a significant number simply seemed to disappear entirely. What kind of tactical formation is that? He demanded. Sir, our combat analysis systems can't identify any recognizable pattern. They appear to be avoiding battle entirely. Before Zelthan could respond, the first wave of attacks began. But instead of coming from the scattered human ships, they came from everywhere else. The asteroid belt, which had appeared empty on all their scans, suddenly came alive with weapons fire. Dozens of hidden installations that had been perfectly camouflaged as dead rocks began launching missiles, particle beams, and weapons systems that Dominion sensors couldn't even classify. Evasive maneuvers, Zelthan commanded. But his fleet's response was sluggish. Dominion doctrine called for maintaining formation to maximize defensive capabilities, but the human attacks were coming from literally every direction simultaneously. Sir, we're detecting weapons fire from the planet's moon, from orbital platforms around the gas giant, and from installations throughout the asteroid belt. Also from Admiral. They appear to have weapons platforms inside the planet's atmosphere. Inside the atmosphere? That's tactically impossible. Atmospheric weapons can't achieve sufficient range or accuracy for space combat. Sir, they appear to be using the planet's magnetic field as a particle accelerator. They're launching projectiles at near light speed using the entire planet as a weapons platform. Zelthan watched in growing disbelief as his tactical display showed incoming fire from angles that shouldn't have been possible. The humans weren't just fighting unconventionally. They were fighting in ways that violated basic principles of space combat. Sir, his weapons officer called out, the incoming projectiles aren't following ballistic trajectories. They're changing course in flight. Guided missiles. No, sir. They appear to be using some kind of gravitational manipulation to alter their paths after launch. Our defensive systems can't calculate intercept courses because the projectiles keep changing direction. The first impact struck the Dominion fleet's outer perimeter, and the results were immediately alarming. Instead of the clean energy signatures of conventional weapons, the human projectiles seemed to cause cascading system failures that spread throughout affected ships. Damage report. Sir, the Righteous Vengeance reports total systems failure. All power, communications, and life support are offline. What kind of weapon causes that? Unknown, sir. The projectile appears to have delivered some kind of nanotechnology payload that's systematically dismantling their ship's systems from the inside. Before Zelfan could process this information, a new alarm began blaring. Admiral, we're detecting faster-than-light signatures. Multiple ships are entering the system. Reinforcements? We weren't expecting support for another 6 standard periods. Sir, the signatures don't match any known Dominion vessel configurations. They appear to be human ships. The tactical display updated to show dozens of new contacts emerging from hyperspace at various points throughout the system. But these weren't the interceptors they had seen launching from human bases. These were larger, more sophisticated vessels that looked like nothing in the Dominion's database of human capabilities. How did they achieve faster-than-light travel so quickly? Our intelligence indicated they were decades away from that technology. Sir, his science officer reported. Analysis suggests these ships were already under construction when we arrived. The humans appear to have been building FTL-capable warships for years. A new transmission came in from the lead human vessel, and this time the face on the screen belonged to someone Zelfan hadn't seen before. The human was older, with graying hair and what appeared to be extensive military decorations on his uniform. Admiral Zelfan, the human said. I'm Fleet Admiral Jackson Torres, of the Earth Deep Space Navy. I apologize for the delayed introduction, but we've been busy positioning our assets. Deep Space Navy? The humans had multiple military branches. I wanted to personally thank you for giving us 72 hours to prepare. That was very sporting of you. Most of our strategic planning assumed we'd have to begin hostilities immediately after first contact, Admiral Torres gestured, and the display behind him showed a 3-dimensional tactical map of the entire system. You see, Admiral, humans have been studying theoretical interstellar warfare for over a century. We've run millions of computer simulations, developed thousands of tactical scenarios, and prepared for every possible variation of alien invasion we could imagine. The tactical map showed the positions of both fleets, with movement vectors and projected engagement zones highlighted. Your approach was actually one of our favorite scenarios. Superior enemy fleet arrives, demands surrender, provides time for consideration. It's tactically sound, psychologically effective, and has probably worked very well against species that think defensively. The map began showing projected movements and engagement patterns. The problem is that humans don't think defensively. We think aggressively. When faced with a superior enemy, our first instinct isn't to find ways to survive the encounter. Our first instinct is to find ways to win. Admiral Torres paused, and his expression shifted to something that made Zelfan's survival instincts scream warnings. And, Admiral, we've had 72 hours to set up the perfect winning scenario. The transmission cut off, and immediately every alarm in the Dominion Command Center began blaring simultaneously. Report, Zelfan shouted over the chaos. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups from multiple human installations. They appear to be charging some kind of coordinated weapons system. What kind of weapons? Admiral, our sensors are reading energy signatures consistent with stellar manipulation technology. They appear to be preparing to weaponize their sun. Zelfan felt his 4 hearts stop. Stellar manipulation as a weapon? That was theoretical technology that even the Dominion considered impossibly dangerous. Sir, we're also detecting quantum entanglement signatures from their outer system installations. They appear to have weapons that can strike instantaneously across interstellar distances. And, Admiral, his tactical officer added, his voice cracking with panic. Our long-range sensors are detecting FTL signatures at the edge of multiple nearby star systems. It appears the humans have dispatched fleets to our colonial worlds. The tactical display updated to show the true scope of what the humans had accomplished in 72 hours. Not only had they prepared defenses throughout their own system, they had somehow managed to locate and target Dominion installations across dozens of light years.
How?
Zelfan whispered.
How did they find our bases?
The answer came in the form of another transmission, this one from Dr. Giavian, Webb, the cheerful xenobiologist from the first day. Hi again, Admiral. Doctor. Webb said, waving enthusiastically. I hope you're enjoying our little demonstration. I wanted to explain how we managed to locate your colonial installations so quickly. The display behind Dr. Webb showed what appeared to be a star map with hundreds of systems highlighted. Remember those biological samples we extracted from your scout ship traces? Well, it turns out that different star systems have unique isotopic signatures in their stellar radiation. Every species carries trace amounts of these isotopes in their biology, which means we can determine their home system just by analyzing their cellular structure. The star map zoomed in on specific systems, showing detailed orbital mechanics and what appeared to be military installations. Once we knew where to look, it was just a matter of using our deep space observation networks to map your colonial infrastructure. Humans have been building space telescopes for decades, Admiral. We can read the serial numbers on your ships from 50 light-years away. Dr. Webb's smile took on the same unsettling quality Zelton had learned to associate with human communications. But here's the really interesting part. We didn't just locate your bases. We've been studying them, learning about your logistics networks, your supply chains, your communication protocols, even your personnel rotation schedules. The display showed incredibly detailed intelligence profiles of Dominion installations that even Zelfan hadn't seen. Turns out that when you've spent thousands of years conquering species that can't fight back, you get a little sloppy with operational security. Your bases are very well defended against frontal assault, but they're not prepared for the kind of asymmetrical warfare humans specialize in. The transmission shifted to show real-time surveillance footage from what appeared to be Dominion colonial worlds. Zelfan watched in horror as human ships, somehow undetected by planetary defense systems, began launching what appeared to be infiltration operations. Right about now, Dr. Webb continued cheerfully, our advanced team should be beginning simultaneous operations against 17 of your primary colonial installations. Nothing too dramatic, just some strategic infrastructure disruption. The surveillance footage showed human operatives somehow moving undetected through Dominion facilities, planting devices that Zelfan couldn't identify. Nanotechnology is wonderful stuff, Admiral. A single infiltrator can carry enough programmable matter to disable an entire planetary defense grid. And the beautiful thing about nanotechnology is that it's almost impossible to detect until it's too late. As if to demonstrate this point, the surveillance footage showed Dominion installations across multiple worlds simultaneously going dark as their power systems failed in cascading waves. Of course, Dr. Webb added, we're not trying to cause casualties. Humans prefer to win through superior tactics rather than simple destruction. Your colonial populations are perfectly safe. They just won't be providing any support for your military operations for the next few months. The transmission ended, leaving Zelfan staring at a tactical situation that had transformed from a standard conquest operation into an impossible strategic nightmare. Admiral, Zekthar reported quietly, we're receiving surrender requests from our colonial governors. Apparently, the humans have offered to restore their infrastructure in exchange for immediate withdrawal from this system. Surrender requests? From our own colonies? Sir, the humans appear to have demonstrated that they can disable our military infrastructure without harming civilian populations. Our governors are impressed. Before Zelfin could respond, Fleet Admiral Torres appeared on the main screen again. Admiral Zelfin, he said, I hope our tactical demonstration has been educational. We wanted to show you that humans approach warfare differently than the species you're accustomed to fighting. Torres gestured to a display showing the current tactical situation. Traditional military doctrine focuses on achieving victory through superior firepower and defensive positioning. Human military doctrine focuses on achieving victory by making it impossible for the enemy to continue fighting. The display showed the scope of human operations across Dominion space, with supply lines disrupted, communication networks compromised, and colonial infrastructure neutralized. We don't need to destroy your fleet, Admiral. We just need to make it irrelevant. Your ships are powerful, but they're designed for conquest operations supported by extensive logistics networks. Take away that support, and even the most advanced warships become very expensive pieces of scrap metal. Torres paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a tone of respectful professionalism that somehow made his words even more threatening. So here's our revised offer, Admiral. You have 24 hours to begin withdrawing your fleet from our system. During that time, we'll continue restoring infrastructure to your colonies in exchange for their cooperation. Your people won't be harmed, but your military operations in this sector are effectively over. The transmission continued, but Zelfin found himself focusing on something that had been bothering him since the humans' first response. They had been laughing, not out of desperation or defiance, but out of genuine amusement. And now he understood why. The humans had never seen this as a battle between survival and extinction. They had seen it as the opening move of an elaborate game they'd been preparing to play for decades. And they were winning. Admiral Zelfin had made his decision to withdraw, but the humans weren't finished with their lessons. "Admiral," came the familiar voice of President Chen over the communication array. "Before you leave our system, we have one more demonstration we'd like to share with you. Think of it as a graduation gift." Zelfin almost didn't want to hear what new impossibility the humans had prepared. Over the past 5 days, they had systematically dismantled every assumption he'd held about warfare, technology, and the nature of civilization itself. But morbid curiosity compelled him to listen. "You see," President Chen continued, "our xenobiological teams have been analyzing not just your species, but the species you've conquered. We've been studying the historical records, the cultural artifacts, the technological developments of all 847 civilizations that surrendered to your ultimatum." The main display showed what appeared to be a vast database containing information about hundreds of different species, their homeworlds, their technologies, and their current status under Dominion rule. What we discovered was fascinating. Every single species you conquered had achieved remarkable technological and cultural developments before you arrived. Advanced mathematics, sophisticated art, elegant architecture, complex philosophy. Really impressive civilizations. President Chen paused, and something in his tone made Zelton's mandibles click nervously. "But Admiral, here's what we found most interesting. Not one of these species had ever developed truly effective military technology. They were all peaceful, cooperative, scientifically advanced civilizations that had never needed to become good at killing." The display shifted to show detailed analyses of the conquered species' technological capabilities. The Velthani had achieved perfect quantum computing but had never developed guided missiles. The Corithians had mastered faster-than-light communication but had never built armored vehicles. The Zelani had created self-sustaining ecosystems on dozens of worlds but had never designed a single weapons platform. Zelthan began to see where this was leading, and he didn't like it. Every species you've encountered achieved peace first, then technology. They developed science to improve their quality of life, to explore the universe, to create beautiful things. None of them developed science to kill their neighbors more efficiently. The display showed a comparison chart that made Zelfan's 4 hearts sink simultaneously. "Humans are different, Admiral. We never achieved peace. We never stopped trying to kill each other. Every technological advancement in human history was driven by our desire to gain an advantage over other humans. We are a species that weaponized everything, from rocks to quantum mechanics." President Chen's image appeared on screen, and his expression was unnervingly thoughtful. "Which brings us to an interesting question, Admiral. What happens when a species like yours, who became powerful by conquering peaceful civilizations, encounters a species that spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare?" Before Zelthan could even begin to formulate an answer, new alarms began sounding throughout the command chamber. "Admiral," Zekdar reported, "we're receiving communications from the homeworld. High Command is requesting immediate status report. Patch it through." The image that appeared on screen was that of Supreme Commander Vorthak, the highest-ranking military officer in the Dominion. His expression was grim. "Admiral Zelfin," Vorthak said without preamble, "explain to me how a single primitive world has managed to neutralize 17 of our colonial installations simultaneously." Zelfin felt his career flashing before his eyes. "Supreme Commander, the humans possess capabilities that weren't indicated in our intelligence reports." "What kind of capabilities?" "Sir, they appear to have achieved technological parity with our forces in less than 2 standard periods. They've also demonstrated strategic thinking that exceeds anything in our tactical databases." Supreme Commander Vorthak's expression darkened. "Technological parity?" "Admiral, they were supposed to be decades away from interstellar capability." "Yes, sir, but they appear to have been preparing for hostile first contact for over 60 of their years. Their entire technological development was oriented toward military applications." "Admiral, I'm looking at reports that suggest these humans have somehow managed to turn our own colonies against us. How is that possible?" Before Zelthan could answer, another voice interrupted from off-screen. "If I may, Supreme Commander," came the cheerful voice of Dr. Webb, "I think I can help explain that." The display split to show both Supreme Commander Vorthak and the human xenobiologist, who was still smiling that unsettling smile. "Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth Defense Research Division," the human said, introducing himself politely. "We've been monitoring your communications, and I wanted to clarify a few things about our operations in your colonial territories." Vorthak's 4 eyes widened in shock.
You've been monitoring our communications?
That's impossible. Our quantum encryption protocols are unbreakable. Oh, you're absolutely right. Dr. Webb agreed enthusiastically. Your encryption is excellent. We couldn't break it even with our best computers. So instead, we developed something we call social engineering. The display behind Dr. Webb showed what appeared to be detailed psychological profiles of Dominion colonial administrators. You see, Supreme Commander, humans learned a long time ago that it's much easier to convince someone to give you information than it is to steal it from them. We've spent centuries perfecting the art of psychological manipulation. The profiles showed incredibly detailed analyses of individual Dominion officers, including their personal motivations, fears, ambitions, and psychological vulnerabilities.
When our infiltration teams reached your colonies, they didn't try to hack your computer systems.
They just talked to your people. Friendly conversations, really. About their families, their career goals, their concerns about military policy. Dr. Webb's smile took on that quality that Zelthan had learned to associate with very bad news. Turns out that when you've spent 3,000 years conquering defenseless civilizations, your military personnel aren't trained to resist sophisticated psychological operations. Most of them were happy to share information once they understood that we weren't there to hurt anyone. Supreme Commander Vorthak's mandibles were clicking rapidly, which Zelthan recognized as a sign of extreme agitation. But the really interesting part, Dr. Zusser, Webb continued, was what they told us about Dominion society, about how your empire actually functions, how decisions are made, how resources are distributed. The display shifted to show what appeared to be an organizational chart of the entire Dominion power structure. See, Supreme Commander, humans have been studying political systems for thousands of years. We've built empires, destroyed empires, infiltrated empires, and subverted empires. We know how they work, and more importantly, we know how they fail. The chart highlighted key vulnerabilities in the Dominion's governmental structure, supply chains, and communication networks. Your empire is built on the assumption that conquered species will remain passive and cooperative. But what happens when someone starts encouraging them to be less cooperative? Supreme Commander Vorthak's image suddenly cut out, replaced by what appeared to be chaos in the Dominion Command Center. Dr. Webb's smile widened. Right about now, Supreme Commander, you should be receiving reports from colonial governors throughout your empire. It seems that when presented with detailed information about human technology and defensive capabilities, they've decided that continued resistance to human expansion might not be in their best interests. Admiral Zelthan stared at the display in growing horror as reports began flooding in from across Dominion space. Colonial worlds were declaring neutrality, trade routes were being disrupted, and entire sectors of the empire were suddenly refusing to provide military support. How? Zelthan whispered. How did you convince them to abandon their loyalty to the Dominion? Dr. Webb's expression became almost sympathetic. Admiral, we didn't convince them to abandon anything. We just provided them with accurate information about their strategic situation. The display showed real-time intelligence updates from across the galaxy. When you tell someone that they're part of a vast, powerful empire that can protect them from any threat, that's a compelling argument for loyalty. But when you demonstrate that this empire can be neutralized by a single world that just achieved interstellar flight, well, that changes the risk-benefit analysis considerably. President Chen's image reappeared alongside Dr. Kerr. Webb's, and both humans were wearing expressions that Zelthan was beginning to recognize as predatory satisfaction. The thing is, Admiral, President Chen said, humans don't just fight wars. We end them permanently. We don't want to spend the next 1,000 years dealing with periodic conflicts with the Dominion. We want this particular problem solved completely. The display showed what appeared to be a comprehensive strategic analysis of the entire galactic political situation. So, while your fleet has been sitting here trying to decide whether to fight or retreat, our diplomatic teams have been visiting every conquered species in your empire. We've been sharing technology, providing military advisors, and generally explaining to them that the Dominion isn't quite as invincible as they believed. Admiral Zelthan watched in fascination and horror as the map showed the Dominion Empire fragmenting in real time. Dozens of worlds were declaring independence. Colonial governors were switching sides, and entire fleets were simply disappearing from the strategic display. But, Admiral, President Chen continued, here's what I really want you to understand. This isn't revenge. This isn't conquest. This is just humans being humans. The president's expression became almost philosophical. You see, humans are problem solvers. When we encounter a problem, we don't just find a temporary solution, we find a permanent solution. The Dominion represented a problem, a powerful, aggressive empire that might threaten Earth. So we solved that problem. The strategic display showed the final collapse of Dominion central authority as communication networks failed and colonial rebellions spread throughout the galaxy. The beautiful thing about this approach, President Chen added, is that we didn't have to conquer anyone. We didn't have to destroy any worlds or kill any civilians. We just had to demonstrate that the Dominion's power was based on reputation rather than actual capability. Admiral Zelthan found himself staring at the ruins of an empire that had lasted 3 millennia, brought down in less than a week by a species that had achieved interstellar flight approximately 72 hours ago. Admiral, came the voice of Fleet Admiral Torres, appearing on a separate communication channel. We're prepared to offer safe passage for your fleet back to your homeworld. We're also prepared to provide humanitarian assistance to any Dominion colonies that request it. Torres paused, and when he continued, his tone was businesslike but not unkind. However, we want to be very clear about the terms of this arrangement. The Dominion Empire is finished. Your homeworld is welcome to join the galactic community as an equal partner, but the age of Dominion conquest is over. The display showed human ships throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors but as liberators, helping former Dominion colonies establish independent governments and defensive alliances. We've spent the last 72 hours demonstrating that humans can outthink, outfight, and outmaneuver the Dominion military. But Admiral, that was never really the point. Fleet Admiral Torres's expression became almost gentle. The point was to show you, and everyone else in the galaxy, that empires built on fear and conquest are fundamentally fragile. They look impressive until someone calls their bluff. Admiral Zelthan realized that the laughter had stopped, not because the humans were no longer amused, but because they had achieved everything they wanted to achieve. They hadn't just defeated the Dominion Empire, they had made it irrelevant. And they had done it without firing a single shot in anger. 6 months later, Admiral Zelthan found himself in the most surreal situation of his long military career, sitting in what humans called a coffee shop on a space station orbiting Earth, having a casual conversation with President Chen about the future of galactic civilization. The Terran orbital station was unlike anything Zelthan had ever seen. Where Dominion installations were designed for efficiency and control, human architecture seemed designed for comfort. Beings from dozens of different species moved freely through corridors filled with art, music, and what appeared to be recreational facilities. Former Dominion colonies now sent representatives to learn about human technology, philosophy, and something they called democratic governance. You look confused, Admiral.
President Chen observed, sipping from a cup containing a beverage that produced an aroma Zelthan found surprisingly pleasant.
I am, Zelthan admitted. 6 months ago, your species dismantled a 3,000-year-old empire in less than a week. I expected you to establish yourselves as the new galactic power. Instead, you seem to be helping everyone else establish their own governments. President Chen smiled, and Zelthan realized he had learned to find that expression comforting rather than threatening. Admiral, humans learned something important during our own history. Empires don't last. They're inherently unstable because they're based on the assumption that some people deserve to rule over others. We tried building empires ourselves many times. They all collapsed eventually. The president gestured toward the observation window, where dozens of different species ships could be seen docked at the station. What does last is cooperation between equals. Trade partnerships, mutual defense agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration. These relationships are stable because everyone benefits from maintaining them. Zelthan considered this while watching a group of young beings from various species engaged in what appeared to be some kind of competitive game that involved considerable laughter. But surely humans could have established themselves as the dominant galactic power. Your technological capabilities, your strategic thinking, your military effectiveness could have, yes, President Chen agreed. But why would we want to? Dominance means responsibility. It means having to make decisions for beings who might know their own needs better than we do. It means spending our time and resources maintaining control instead of exploring, creating, and discovering new things. Dr. Webb appeared at their table, carrying his own cup of the aromatic beverage and looking as enthusiastically cheerful as ever. Admiral, he said, settling into a chair that automatically adjusted to accommodate his human physiology. Perfect timing. I wanted to show you some of the research results from our collaborative xenobiology projects. He activated a portable display that showed what appeared to be a complex scientific database. Remember when I mentioned that humans study everything to find ways to weaponize it? Well, It turns out that when you apply the same analytical approach to peaceful purposes, you get some fascinating results. The display showed technological innovations that had emerged from combining human engineering principles with knowledge from former Dominion species. The Velfani quantum computing techniques combined with human military encryption has produced communication systems that are not only unbreakable, but actually improve in security when under attack. The Corithian faster-than-light communication merged with our strategic coordination protocols has created a galactic information network that makes real-time cooperation possible across interstellar distances. Dr. Webb's smile had evolved into something that Zelfin now recognized as genuine enthusiasm rather than predatory satisfaction. But the really exciting developments are happening in areas we never expected. Turns out that when you combine human competitive instincts with other species' collaborative approaches, you get innovation rates that exceed anything we achieved on our own. The display showed research facilities throughout the galaxy where mixed teams of humans and other species were working on projects ranging from terraforming technology to artistic collaborations. Admiral, Dr. Webb continued, humans spent thousands of years competing with each other because we didn't have anyone else to compete with. But now we've got entire civilizations full of beings who approach problems differently than we do. It's like the ultimate intellectual challenge. President Chen nodded in agreement. Humans are competitive by nature, Admiral, but we discovered that competition works better when everyone has a fair chance to win. The Dominion system was boring, because the outcome was always predetermined. Exelthan found himself considering concepts he had never thought about during his centuries of military service. The idea that competition could be more satisfying than domination was alien to everything he understood about power structures. But what happens when conflicts arise? He asked. When species disagree about resources, territory, or fundamental principles? We argue about it, President Chen said simply, loudly, enthusiastically, and often for extended periods. Then we find compromises that work for everyone involved. And if compromise isn't possible, Dr. Webb leaned forward conspiratorially, then we have something humans call friendly competition. We settle disputes through games, contests, intellectual challenges, artistic competitions, or sports matches. The winners get their preferred solution, but everyone has fun in the process. The display showed what appeared to be some kind of massive sporting event taking place on a planet Zelfin didn't recognize, with beings from dozens of species participating in elaborate competitions. The beautiful thing about competitive problem-solving, Dr. Webb explained, is that even when you lose, you usually learn something interesting. And when everyone's learning, everyone's advancing. Admiral Zelfin was interrupted in his contemplations by the arrival of a familiar figure, Fleet Admiral Torres, who approached their table with what appeared to be a young human in tow. Admiral Zelthan, Torres said, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Sarah Chen, our newest graduate from the Interspecies Diplomatic Corps. The young human stepped forward, and to Zelthan's surprise, performed what he recognized as a traditional Dominion greeting gesture. Honored to meet you, Admiral, she said in perfect Dominion standard. I've been studying your species' military history as part of my diplomatic training. Your strategic campaigns in the Outer Rim were genuinely impressive examples of logistical coordination. Zelfin felt something he hadn't experienced in months, professional pride. Thank you, Lieutenant. Though I suspect your species could have achieved the same results with considerably fewer resources. Lieutenant Chen smiled, and Zelfin realized he was looking at the expression of someone who genuinely enjoyed intellectual challenges. Probably, but that's not the point. The point is understanding how different species approach strategic problems. Humans tend towards efficiency and adaptability, but Dominion military doctrine emphasizes stability and predictability. Both approaches have advantages depending on the circumstances. She activated her own portable displays showing comparative analyses of different species' problem-solving methodologies. We're building a database of how different civilizations think about everything, from engineering challenges to artistic expression. The goal is to create collaborative frameworks that leverage each species' natural strengths. President Chen looked at Zelthan thoughtfully. Admiral, we've been hoping you might consider participating in one of our collaborative projects. What kind of project? Strategic planning for large-scale colonization efforts. Several species have requested assistance in expanding to new systems, but they want to do it sustainably, without displacing existing ecosystems or causing conflicts with neighboring civilizations. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. Your experience with large-scale logistical coordination would be invaluable. And frankly, humans are terrible at long-term planning. We tend to focus on solving immediate problems rather than thinking about consequences decades in advance. Zelfin considered this offer while watching the activity around the space station. Former enemies working together on projects that would benefit everyone involved. Competition used as a tool for innovation rather than dominance. Military expertise applied to peaceful colonization rather than conquest. Why? He asked finally. Why offer this to me? 6 months ago, I was prepared to destroy your world. President Chen's expression became serious. Admiral, humans believe that everyone deserves a second chance to be better than they were. You were serving a system that turned your considerable abilities toward conquest and control. We're offering you the chance to apply those same abilities toward exploration and cooperation. He paused, looking out at the diverse collection of ships docked at the station. Besides, we've learned that the most effective way to prevent future conflicts is to give potential enemies reasons to become allies instead. Admiral Zelfin found himself laughing and realized it was the first time in his long life that laughter had expressed joy rather than contempt or triumph. Humans, he said, shaking his head in amazement, are the strangest species in the galaxy. Thank you, Dr. Rorpen, Webb said cheerfully. We work very hard at it. 3 years later, Admiral Zelfin stood in the command center of the first joint Human-Dominion deep space exploration vessel, watching as his mixed crew of humans, former Dominion personnel, and beings from dozen other species worked together to map uncharted regions of the galaxy. The mission was ambitious. Locate suitable worlds for peaceful colonization while cataloging new forms of life and establishing contact with previously unknown civilizations. It required all of Zelfin's strategic planning abilities, the humans' technological innovation, and cooperative contributions from species throughout what was now called the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Chen, now promoted to commander and serving as his diplomatic officer. We're receiving signals from the system ahead. Looks like another intelligent species. What kind of signals? Standard mathematical progressions, followed by what appears to be cultural information. Music, art, scientific principles. They're trying to demonstrate peaceful intent. Zelfin smiled, an expression he had learned from humans. Prepare the standard first contact protocols, full cultural exchange package, technological cooperation offers, and, he paused, remembering his first encounter with humanity. Assurances that we're not here to demand anyone's surrender. Commander Chen laughed and the sound was picked up by the diverse crew throughout the ship. Admiral, she said, I think they're going to like us. As the ship moved toward their first contact with another new civilization, Zelfin reflected on how much had changed since that day when the Dominion fleet had arrived at Earth expecting easy conquest. The humans had been right about many things, but most importantly, they had been right about laughter. Not the laughter of superiority or contempt, but the laughter of beings who found joy in challenges, who discovered satisfaction in cooperation, and who understood that the universe was far more interesting when everyone was free to contribute their unique perspectives. The galaxy had indeed learned to laugh, and Zelfin had discovered that it was a much more pleasant sound when everyone was laughing together. Behind them, throughout the expanding network of allied worlds, former conquerors and former victims worked side by side on projects that would benefit species they had never met, on worlds they would never visit, simply because they had learned that cooperation was more satisfying than domination. The humans had demanded nothing, conquered no one, and established no empire. Instead, they had taught the galaxy how to be friends, and somehow that had turned out to be the most effective form of conquest imaginable.